Thank you very much. It's good to see you all. Those are in person, who I saw a little bit last night. We won't talk about the events of last night. And then those remote, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm Avi Freedman. I'm CEO and one of the founders at Kentik. People ask me sometimes what area of technology I focus on, and I explain to them that I come from the primordial ooze of nerd before we all specialized and evolved into storage this or compute that or whatever. But I'm going to give you an overview of what we're trying to do overall at Kentik. And unfortunately, I personally will not be doing demo in that, so I'll try to keep it brief. And then we'll also be talking about a few different areas of the product that intersect the infrastructure more broadly, but from a network perspective. So our goal at Kentik as a 8.5-year-old company is to make life awesome. Everything is awesome for people running infrastructure, except when it isn't. And so our focus is from the network layer on up, bringing everything together. So it could be NetFlow and SFlow, or it could be Cloud VPC flow logs, or performance testing of the internet, or telemetry and metrics and things like that. And in having as much application context, enrichment of what user group business impact of things are, so that you can solve problems. And then we also operate and interoperate with other platforms that people have, because there probably aren't going to be there isn't going to be any one system to do everything for everybody. When we started, the world was appliances that typically did different things and couldn't keep all the data. When we started in 2014, the first thing we did was build a big data platform underneath so that we could take and actually keep all the data. So we focus mostly on operations, although because we do keep the data, sometimes people use us for forensics. So I would have put 10.10.10.10 if I had known the delegate earlier conversation, or as I said, 224 is my favorite screwing around IP space. But not knowing in modern infrastructure, you often don't know in advance what kind of questions you're going to be asking, and that's what we designed for. So if you are an enterprise and or even a service provider and you're dependent on the network, well, which network? What does network mean? There's the part that is the SaaS over there that your applications need to get to Twilio. Twilio has a network, it's not yours. There's the internet, there's your own data centers and WAN, there's cloud. And to us, that's all network, and all the applications that run on top and around it are important to understand. And without the network, the infrastructure doesn't work, the cloud doesn't work. And of course, as we come from a networking background, it's often, oh, it's the network, and that's where we try to come in. And then sometimes when it is the application, we show that it's the application. So our goal, and we partner with folks like New Relic, Sumo Logic. Our customers can use our integrations to talk to Prometheus and Influx, and we have Grafana plugins. But our goal is at the network, in there and on down, to do the deep debugging, and if there's application issues, at least understand the context and point back to where someone can go to, because the deep app instrumentation is not our focus. And so when we started, as I mentioned, appliances were good for the time, but lacked a lot of features. Understanding the context, like what application this traffic is for, so you don't need to scry at IP addresses, especially in our fun IPv6 world, where you're probably not going to memorize all of them unless it's just an IPv4 address inside an IPv6 address, which is what a lot of people do. And being agnostic, so taking all the infrastructure, whether it could be GCP, Azure, Kubernetes, performance testing, and bringing it together, and then just being an open platform. There are some things we do we won't show about proactive insights, like, hey, dude, someone stole your battery. You're being attacked. You should go look at that. And we do proactive anomaly detection on performance and traffic engineering. And if there's interest, when we go through cloud, synthetics, and Kubernetes, we can show a little bit of that and how we do that. I'm not going to read this whole slide, but if you think about it, we're trying to get a wide variety of telemetry, make it all look similar, because NetFlow v5 is very different from Cloud VPC flow logs or Istio logs from Envoy. But they all actually have some traffic that went from somewhere to somewhere, and some of them have performance, and some of them have security data. And then adding context is the piece that I think really observability solutions need to do. So we talked a little bit before this with a couple people, and I know you talked with IPAM, but typically I go into enterprise and I say, could you please show me your single source of truth for where everything is? And they go, you know, but as many of them as there are, we try to take that, push it in via API or pull it in, and make things make sense. So you can say, are there performance problems affecting Office 365 or my on-prem exchange or things like that? And then, as I mentioned, getting insights so you don't need to, have your spidey sense tell you need to go look at something, but to say, hey, something might be going on. You should come in and look at it. And this is our goal for our customers who are mostly in infrastructure groups as they partner with other groups, whether they're security or platform engineering groups, is to show them when it is not the network. And as time goes on and we get more and more application context, point to where it might be an application problem. If we see that there is an endpoint of an application from our performance testing that is having problems across every network in the world, well, it's probably somewhere in that application at that point. And if we see that there's only one network having a problem, then we can say, okay, it's not, even if the APM level data is saying that their latency is going up, we can say, okay, well, this is actually a network issue and you should do something about it. So again, I'm not going to read this whole slide, but we have one platform that does a lot of things underneath, and then we expose some things on top for different workflows and different kinds of infrastructure, as well as bringing it all together in maps and those insights that I mentioned. So if you think about broadly, we have people that run WANs and WAN, SD-WAN, that's sort of the core offering of the platform. We have people that are very edge focused because we have a lot of customers that are CDNs and content providers and ad tech companies and gaming companies and enterprises that have massive branch connectivity, sometimes just connected right to the internet. Synthetics, which we're going to do a demo of and explain what we're doing there, is performance testing. I really wish network layer equipment would give us good performance data. Very small Cisco's that do NBAR and NetFlow Lite and things like that do, but most does not, especially the 10 gig plus stuff. It's just moving the packets around and giving you samples. So we need to get that performance data elsewhere. DDoS and protecting the network, whether it's from the inside or from the cloud, which we are going to show. And as part of that suite, Kubernetes, and we're going to show what we do there with agents that can actually bring together the traffic and the performance in a cloud native way. And then we have some service provider suites that we've talked about at networking field days and service provider field days that are for our many service provider customers that actually are trying to understand like where traffic is going, but the biggest networks in the world don't actually have what's called an autonomous system number. They're these CDNs and Facebook and Apple and people like that. One other thing we have, which happy to take questions about if there's time at the end, is we've been investing in connecting our platform to other platforms. So a lot of our customers use Grafana in the NOC. We have a Grafana plugin. Sometimes they actually want to push things to their time series systems or their logging systems. So we can actually take all the data that you're going to hear about that comes into Kentik, and we can filter it, roll it up, replicate it, send it in. Sometimes there's enterprises that say, hey, I need to keep copies of this for 3 years, and I'm going to use Athena in Amazon. I just need this in S3 buckets and CSV or JSON. We can do that too. There are things at the scale of modern infrastructure that you're just not going to pull from someone like Kentik via API, 400 million rows of something. There's some workflows where you might want to do a lot of the analysis in an observability platform like Kentik and also have it in your own data lake or pushed into other observability systems, and that's been a big focus for us. Another thing, well, sorry, I left my maybe skip here. For those that are curious about what our data sources are, not going to read all this, but traffic generally, performance testing, synthetics, metrics from the devices, and then that's going to go over time into the compute layer, probably not as much storage, but beyond SNMP and other ways of getting data from the compute. Metadata that we take, Kubernetes is one of the kinds of, the host monitor is one of the kinds of traffic, and then we do a lot of integrations because the number one enterprise automation system that we see is ServiceNow. So people talk about a lot of other things, but the actual orchestrating human workflows of how things get connected, a lot of the anomalies that we detect and go out to ServiceNow, or sometimes a lot of the workflows that might get initiated elsewhere, they might call us via API to enrich information about, hey, this user's having a problem. What was the traffic, or what was the traffic proximal to them? And as an open platform, we support that. So our focus is enterprise. A lot of the people that you've heard about that build, internet infrastructure, carriers, cloud companies, and we run software as a service. We run SaaS. We do it like server huggers, like I am. So we run in Equinix and do DRT and buy servers and netboot them and run containers on them because I don't like giving money to Uncle Jazzy if I don't have to. We are in the clouds to take VPC flow logs, do performance testing. We're not opposed to it. We are a hybrid infrastructure ourselves. And we're running over 1 trillion elements a day that we're just ingesting, keeping them all. We do private clusters for people that have compliance requirements, service providers, folks like that. And for us, the traditional enterprise is one big vertical, web companies, and then service providers. And today we're talking more on the use cases that we see enterprises seeing and the kinds of infrastructure that we see them monitoring. But if you have questions about anything else, you can ask any of the other presenters too, or I should have time for a couple questions. Just very briefly, last couple slides, things that we're focused on right now are we've taken metrics for a long time since we started, but now doing the full depth of whether it's SNMP exploration or the breadth of streaming telemetry, that's being built in the platform, just like our traffic capabilities to be at very large scale. But right now we're saying if you want to dump your IoT metrics in, our UI is not for that. We have APIs and things like that. We're very focused on completing on the infrastructure layer. You'll see some cloud maps and things we do that comes from VPC flow logs, but also a lot of metrics we're pulling to understand what are the gateways and what are the VPCs and what are the VMs provisioned. Events, logs, but starting with in the Kentik land, being able to correlate, oh, someone configured something, traffic dropped, maybe you should look at that. Some of the things we do with companies like Blueware and iTential, the network layer automation, is they'll make a change, and then they'll check Kentik and say, is everything okay, whether it's with traffic or performance or things like that. That is about as advanced as we see automation in the real world, is if you have your interface descriptions proper and your lifecycle automation, and maybe you push some changes and check, that's about it. And so far, it seems to require more humans rather than less, but I guess over time, there'll probably be less humans because you have to tools and validation. Most of the cloud outages that we follow that involve storage and load balancers and other things are actually network outages relating to automation. So, people need to be careful. Every time we add more data sources, we're trying to do more of, hey, here's the problem. Even for things we don't do the debugging of, like application, because ultimately that's what saves people a lot of time. And you'll actually see one of the things that we're working on, which is Kentik Kube, which is a really interesting intersection between the application, so you get PID and pod and things like that, and the infrastructure, because we can take routing and other info and see from this pod, how is the traffic going? Where is there a problem? Is it, again, that application network boundary? And then just lots and lots of integrations, as well as continuing some of the topology work we have. Another thing I'll just show, I think last slide, just to help you with some context about Kentik. Things we're not working on that customers sometimes ask us for, but we're not trying to do everything all at once. The things crossed out are things that we said, a few years ago we weren't working on, so this is not forever, but config management, that's a very long tail thing involved with lots of vendor bugs. It's a mitzvah for those that know the word, for people that are solving that problem, and we love to integrate with folks that are doing that. But I'm excited that actually we're moving forward in that, and hopefully the as much as I miss the clickety, hopefully that'll go away even more. IGP, which is internal routing protocols. There was a company, Packet Design, that did a pretty good job with that. It's a little bit older, generation, but they do an okay job. We don't have the energy for that. And then as we think about the application, we're not doing the traditional APM stuff. You might see us do tracing at some point, but having all the agents and doing all the instrumentation, our view is we'd rather integrate. We'll take, the idea of what are the entities from a New Relic, bring that in as context, but we're not going to do, all of that. And then there are a number of infrastructure layer things that for now, at least, we're not getting into. They may come in as metrics as we extend our metrics platform, storage, campus Wi-Fi. Generally, people have good controllers that have more telemetry than we're going to go pull. And then there are some security use cases and just BI, because we are a database with an API. People sometimes want to just hook up Looker and use it for a lot of the enterprise side, and we'd rather they generally have demands that are not the operational demands that we're focused our UI around. So we're an infrastructure company focused at the network layer, trying to take the breadth of that, get more application context, and today we'll show you some of the things that live at the border there between the application and the network.
What you talked about so far this morning, a new platform or just an extension of the existing platform for monitoring BGP and other route peerings?
It's the same platform underneath that started with NetFlow and BGP and metrics. Then we added cloud from a just taking VPC flow logs before we added some of the more BGP monitoring things that we've done recently. But it's all the same platform underneath. Okay. So we can store BGP data and flow data and metrics, and we can actually unify it in interesting ways. But a lot of the things that we've learned as we've grown are a lot of the first people we sold to were I call them data dreamers. Like, I need to ask these 5 questions, and then tomorrow I might need to ask these 4 questions. And no, I don't want my system to be like taking the SAT. I'm not going to tell you in advance what questions I'm going to ask. But inside an enterprise, there's a NOC. There's a platform engineering team that does not know what BGP is. There's a security team that's trying to say, who's talking to Google DNS? And those people don't all know, all the network primitives and things like that. So we try as we grow to build on top of that, extend the platform to do things like logs and more full metrics, and then add workflows and visualizations on top that help people that don't hold the network in their head to use it. But it's the same platform that we've been building since 2014.
Yeah. In Kubernetes, are you leveraging this by using your own operator, or how are you?
Yeah, you'll hear a little bit more about that. I don't want to steal all the thunder. I'm trying to give the overview. But yeah, it's a eBPF agent that will run and can be deployed. Now, the interesting question is what team goes and does that, but it's a daemon set and can be an operator. And because eBPF gives you access at that intersection, if there's traffic terminating on the machine, the TCP info struct gives you latency and loss and things that are very expensive to get otherwise at that kind of resolution. So yeah, pretty excited about that.
You see any diminishing returns with like S-Flow and NetFlow? Is that really, it seems to me like it's just going to go away, right? It just doesn't seem to be.
Like IPv4.
Was it?
Like IPv4. Yeah, exactly. It's going to go away. I would say it's not increasing. There probably are going to be, no offense to our next presenter, no new NetFlow nerds born in the universe. So I probably know most of the NetFlow nerds that will ever exist, and maybe have ever existed. I don't know about that. But there were some vendors that thought that we were going to move to cloud, and either the whole world was going to do packet copying in the cloud, and that hasn't really been the way. Or that you were going to run virtual routers in the cloud and do S-Flow from there, and that was going to be the telemetry because VPC flow logs are. No, don't laugh. You can go to any major router vendor and they have, a virtual whatever that.
Course, yeah.
And we have some enterprises that do it. Virtual Arista, virtual Cisco, virtual Juniper. There.
For my big cores.
Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't seem to be the cloud architecture that we're seeing. So, but we're also not seeing the grand, everyone is moving from cloud and repatriating 100%. But we are seeing that people that have slowed down, they're okay, maybe I'm going to be hybrid. And so, or, at least some things. So I would say as we turn on new enterprises that have global infrastructure, the MPLS infrastructure that emits S-Flow or NetFlow is not becoming less. In fact, it's a core part of almost every enterprise we turn on. Okay. I don't know what the delegates are seeing or, but some people, some of my NetFlow nerd friends don't like me because I think S-Flow is better because then you can see whether it's your Roku talking to your HP printer talking to Afghanistan, but because you're more likely to get MAC addresses and some other things, and it's easier for us to extend because NetFlow you only get the decodes that the chip does, whereas S-Flow is. Oh, yeah. But I can also send the Peter Fall, the S-Flow guy, into fits of rage talking about different ways of sampling that he thinks are statistically not sound. So, no, we still see it. What we're not seeing is like SNMPD is the way to monitor servers and SFlowD to monitor servers, but for the routers and switches, yeah, we do.
Yeah, I didn't see a VMware logo anywhere on there. Are you doing anything with NSX?
Yeah, so we'll take NetFlow from the hypervisors themselves. We've tried to integrate with Verni, the realized network insights, and they're not very interested in that, but we'd love to if you're listening. And both also with the I forget the 4-letter name, the what Wavefront is now, but their focus doesn't seem to be as much the network layer because they have Verni. So we can pull some of the metadata, like what VM is what and owner, and enrich that, but not quite as much as we do with, say, Google Azure and Microsoft and Amazon today.
And no tie-in with NSX?
No tie-in. So no tie-in in terms of feedback loops or orchestration, but we can observe traffic from NSX.
Okay.
So, but just via NetFlow export.
Okay.
Yeah, or I suppose metrics, although that's not in our demo environment, so I can't show you. But I know you can pull that via SNMP. We just haven't done that yet.
I'd imagine VMware would want you to integrate at the network insight layer.
Yeah, have talked to them a couple times about the Verni, the network the vRealize network insight, and they have some APIs, but we have a lot. I mean, almost all of our enterprise customers have VMware somewhere, if not mainly, and we have not. I'll put it on me. We haven't leveraged our customers enough to make enough noise because we think that it would be great integrations, to actually be able to do that bidirectionally. What we'd like is, and maybe again, if I'd love to learn, we'd ideally like a streaming push from Verni of the orchestration data that we could just take in via our API so that we can color all the traffic that we see, whether it's from VMware or not, as to what it is. But we definitely have customers that, we have Python scripts that will scrape their API and load that into Kentik for enrichment. It's just not a push button thing yet.
Okay, and I've worked in VMware environments for forever, and I've never heard anybody call Network Insight Verni.
I believe there are, my weekend at Verni, I believe there are VMware people that call it Verni, but
Okay.
I could be wrong. I'm frequently wrong.